Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Slang podcast. And on this very special episode of season 8, I get to talk about the wonderful new album, Soulful Days, with Addison Rifkind and Michael Duffy. And I have a copy of Fat Produce's first album. I don't know how I found out about you guys, but I got this from Bandcamp and I love it. And then when I got the new album, Soulful Days, which came out a few days ago, I also fell in love with that. So let's get started. Addison, Michael, welcome.
Thanks
Happy
for
to be
having
here.
us. Yeah.
Great to have you here. Great to talk about Soulful Days. If I could start with, could you tell us how you guys came together to form the band?
Yeah, we're actually both from Los Angeles, from Studio City, California, but we didn't know each other there at all. So we moved to Miami independently a few years ago, and we actually met on a gig with organist Adam Scone, playing with his Scone Cash players. And the story famously goes, Duffy turned to me and he goes, "We're going to make records together." And I was like, all right. And turned out to be very true and with some insight into the future. So that's how we met. We met playing on the bandstand together. So
Okay. Thank you for that, Addison. So, was the original plan for it to really be a two-man operation? Though I know you bring in bassists. I think you brought in Renee Camacho for the first album on upright bass, and for Soulful Days you have in Nestor Del Prado.
So I
Was it? Go ahead.
yes, I would say that we always wanted it to be a trio, but it's hard finding that third member for us. And I have a long-standing relationship with Renee Camacho, who plays in War and plays with Kevin Eubanks. And when we put this project together, I always wanted him to be on our first recording because I knew he would set the tone for the style that we would want. And we're just very lucky here in Miami that we have a lot of great bass players to play with. Nestor was the first person that we started playing with a lot and came into the fold around the time we recorded Soulful Days. But if we find that third member, he'll show up. But right now, it's just Addison and I.
And I really appreciate that, and I also appreciate your recording process for Soulful Days and for the first album, Fresh Squeeze. They both have a live feel because they're both pretty much recorded live in studio. Is that correct?
yeah, it's all live to tape, analog, no overdubbing, minimal editing. So I think it's really, really a cool way to record because it's very similar to if you were to hear us live, that's what we're doing. I mean, we sat there on the floor and played everything down on both records, and it's an honest representation of what we sound like. And I think that can really show the evolution of the music too, because I feel like the second one was definitely a level up sonically and playing wise from the first record. And I hope into the future it will be the same kind of evolution, and there's no hiding behind just sitting down and playing. So
Yeah, they both are very warm albums, and both I think are very intimate. Both have a great sound, but conceptually, there's a difference between Fresh Squeeze and Soulful Days in that I think Fresh Squeeze was all original songs,
That's
right?
correct.
So talk a little bit about the change in terms of your approach to the material for Soulful Days.
Well, I think it's almost like a re-engineered thing because Soulful Days is the blueprint for the Fat Produce sound. All those songs we started playing, those are tunes that we picked out together to build the rep for the band and and kind of build what would become Fresh Squeeze. And then when we were in the process of finishing that record, I talked to Addison and said we should do a not necessarily, I wouldn't consider it a cover record, but more of a tribute record to the people who inspired us and got us our sound, got us our vibe. And it was an easy thing for us to go back into the studio quickly and get a good turnaround. So it made the most sense to us as a band.
If you could tell the watchers and listeners, I guess, how long it took to come up with the process, then produce Soulful Days?
Well, to record is very simple for us. It's a 2 day process. It's a very civilized process. It's a 10 to 5 with a lunch break. We cut most of the harder things in the first part of the session and the easier things in the later part of the session over 2 days. The long part of it is figuring out with the label when it's going to come out, and they're run out of things with F Spot. But as far as for us to turn out music, I mean, we could probably turn out. I mean, we're going to have probably 5 records in the can by the end of the year.
Wow.
Just because we just have a lot of music that we want to play. But it's always up to the label, as listening to bands and dealing with bands and going through this process of interviewing bands. The label kind of dictates how the rollout comes out. So we don't know when and if it's going to come out when we want, but they have a plan and we kind of just roll with that. But as far as the recording process, 2 days.
Well, and just to add to that as well, like the originals record, we spent a lot of time writing those tunes together. So all of those songs Duffy and I wrote together in the studio, a year in advance or working up to recording the record. But the second one, those are all tunes from our live set. So that was a little bit more like, we've been playing all of those in shows and gigs and performances. So it was kind of like we were doing the development of that record just through playing weekly together in our gigs. So
Great, Addison. You kind of touched on my next question is that in terms of the material for the second album, how did you come up with that? And you mentioned that some of it was in your live set already. Did you anticipate after finishing Fresh Squeeze that you would do an album of covers?
yeah, I think we've been talking about that the whole time. Kind of like Duffy said, those are the artists and tunes that inspired us to make this music. So to kind of pay tribute to them with this record just seemed like the logical next step. And just looking at the track listing, there's stuff represented from so many great guitarists, and also us being in South Florida and the proximity to the Caribbean, having reggae influences. And then obviously our bassist Nestor Del Prado is Cuban as well. So just kind of this melting pot of sounds and influences kind of coming together in South Florida. Also, 90% of Me Is You, that Gwen McCrae track, that's also, South Florida legend right there. So, taking influences not only from our past, but also, where we're living now and putting that all together onto the record.
I'll add this. I really want to say
Go
this
ahead.
is, all those records that we covered, the bands are 5 people up to 12 people. And we wanted to make sure we deduce that down to a trio and really represent it in our own Fat Produce way. That was really important to us.
I wonder if the term cover is really a good nomenclature for this, because the songs really sound fresh. And there are a lot of songs here that casual jazz listeners or funk listeners may not be aware of. Certainly, there are a lot of songs that you did, which on Soulful Days, which I had not heard of, but inspired me to check out the originals. It really seems a great reinterpretation of some great songs.
Thank you.
So when you finished the first album, and you've already mentioned you have a lot of material working on, was the immediate plan to come up with a album of covers for Soulful Days, or were you talking about that with the record company? How did that come about?
I think it was the next normal thing for us to do. We had it already in play. And like I said before, it was just an easy turnaround for us to kind of get back in the studio and get something turned around to the label to keep the momentum going for the band.
Yeah, it really does that. And in terms of the recording process, it hasn't really changed much since the first album. In terms of really live in studio, you did change up bassist on this album. Um, what else in terms of your approach has changed since the first album, since Fresh Squeeze?
I will say this, for me, playing quieter, learning how to play quieter and letting the microphones do the work. Because like as I researched all my favorite drummers, I find that in that era of, let's say, 55 to 70, they didn't hit the drums very hard, but the drums sound huge because they're letting the machines do the work. So for me, that's been the biggest change in my playing, going from album one to album two, or even what we've already recorded that's in the can waiting, is just as we go, I learn how to let the microphones do more of the work, and to get the drum sound bigger and fatter without feeling like I need to hit the drums harder.
And
Interesting.
arrangement wise as well, it's like, how can we make a trio sound as full as possible? And I know in my own artistic and musical development, just can I get like a chord melody arrangement for these single note melodies? How can I balance single note playing, chord melody playing? I love practicing and playing straight ahead jazz as well. So that's kind of where my concept comes from. And, a lot of those musicians are kind of the people that invented soul jazz in a way. So just trying to draw from that influence, how can I just improve on the arrangement side of things and make a more full sound for my guitar when you're just in the trio setting? Because if you don't do that, it's, there's no room to hide there. And just to keep things interesting over the course of an album, there has to be some variation in what you're doing. And, people talk about like the guitar being a whole orchestra on its own. If I'm just playing without anyone, I could play a chord melody arrangement and have bass, the chords, and the melody all going at once, right? So if you think about that, you don't even need any other instrument to go along with guitar. So there's a lot, to be done there, a lot of choices to be made, to make it the right arrangement for the situation.
I also add that it's important for us, at least on my end as a rhythm section player with a bass player, that we don't always do the traditional R&B thing and lock the bass to the bass drum. The way that I tune my kit is real open. As you can hear on these records, the bass drum is not low and thumpy. It's kind of, I affectionately call it boingy, and because there's nothing in it. There's no muffling in it. It's wide open, and I play it with a wood beater. And so I kind of always tell our bass players, like, think of what Bootsy might play, but on an upright, kind of your own melody, so that we have three melodies going. I mean, you can follow my bass drum at points. I'd rather have you have landing points with my bass drum than actually always just kind of locking up with it. If we do that, let's do that for a short period of time. But in that experiment, not really knowing, when we've listened to live videos in the early days of us out front, it makes the band sound larger. The bass drum almost acts as a third melody in the arrangement, just by accident making that happen.
That's a very good description, because it does feel, going back to what Addison was talking about, it does feel as if you are not filling all the spaces that you could, which is great. You allow the music to breathe, but there's much more there in my ear, my mind, than a three-piece band. It's wonderful. I want to go back to something you just mentioned, Michael, about your drum sound. Has it changed since the first album?
Yeah.
This was produced by Travis Acker. I don't remember who produced the first album.
Dave
engineered by.
Yeah, Dave Celia, who's the owner of F Spot Records. The bass drum sound definitely changed. It was when we did the first record, it probably had a little bit more muffling on it. And I've kind of gotten to this place where I want the drums, like Addison says, to be an orchestra and breathe and have tone. And I get that from, a combination of what Max Roach did and what Idris Muhammad did. Those two guys are my drum sound blueprint for what I've created. And then, going into every record, researching why I like certain things so much, and finding out, again, like I said earlier, the quieter I play, the better the drums are going to sound, for the sound that I'm looking for. That 60s, mostly that 60s sound is what I'm looking for. And then what I think it really does is it gives more space for the upright to really breathe too, if I'm not taking them out, which I have at times. I'm guilty as charged, but I got this guy. He's keeping me on the straight and narrow, which I'm very grateful for.
And I want to mention, go back and correct myself. It was engineered by Travis Packer at Studio del Sol, Boca Raton, but Addison and Michael produced the album. And Michael, and I'll ask Addison the same question. Was there any change in your equipment for this album versus the first album?
No, I've always been a Gretsch drum guy. It's always Gretsch drums and Tim Roberts cymbals. I'm pretty, the only thing that did change is the heads changed. It's still Aquarian drum heads. I've been with them for over 20 years, but I went from a thicker head to a thinner head. Again, getting more resonance, getting more what I affectionately term as the boing. I want the boingy sound because it again, when it happens and it hits you in the arrangements, especially with a tune like 5446, where it's like you're not used to hearing that drum sound on a Jamaican style tune. And I reference like my hero Carlton Barrett on some of his language, his fill language, and then you hear that in with the upright bass and with the acoustic, kind of jazzier guitar. It just I think it just pops in a different way, And I have friends that always just be like, I can't believe you played a one drop beat or the Sister Nancy beat or any of those beats on your kit. And I just didn't care. I just really wanted to kind of see what would happen. The worst thing was going to happen is we were going to hate it and we wouldn't have put it out, so that's how I looked at it.
Good point.
And then, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit different for myself because for the first record, we went out to Los Angeles to record it. So it wasn't necessarily my choice of amplifier. Also, maybe the guitar I brought, maybe I wouldn't have done that if we weren't flying somewhere. So I think the second record's maybe a little bit more true to what I sound like on any given day. And that's with, I think I used the Fender Blues Deluxe tube amp and this Epiphone Sorrento 1960s semi-hollow body guitar. And that thing's super cool. So that has you can hear it on the second record, just has like a really interesting depth and I think unique tone to that guitar. So that was different from the first record.
Well, the tone's amazing. I thought originally it was like a Gibson 345 semi hollow body or something, but wow, yeah, it's amazing that you both are getting such wonderful tone, and again that it was recorded analog 8-track. It just sounds warm and inviting.
Well, let's say this. I have to tell you, it was recorded on a Tascam 388, which is a home recording unit from the 80s. But drums sound really good on that machine. And I found out about that machine way early on in my career with the other bands that I previously played with. So Travis has that, David has that at his studio. It's kind of the secret sauce to some of our sound.
Wow, it's amazing. If I could, may I ask you about some of the songs and why you decided to use those?
Sure.
All right, then I'm going to start with Gator Bait, the first song on the album. Wonderful song.
Yeah, I mean, that's New Orleans funk right there. I mean, when I first heard, I think that one's easy. I first heard the original track. That was the decision right there. It's such a grooving, slamming track. It kind of has like on the original kind of like the party noise in the background and the hand claps. And I mean, the original has, Rhodes as well. Really cool keyboard solo, but it's a party on a track. And it also, I think, kind of has that Southern funk sound. So I think to focus on something like that made sense for us. And also in the track, we kind of have these nods to some other funk songs in there, some James Brown lines as well. So I think that one kind of harmonically staying over a D minor chord, if we're getting into the theory over here. There's so many funk songs that are in D minor. So it was sort of like, all right, this is a great vehicle for kind of referencing some of those other tunes on there.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. The next song on my list to ask you about is Hung Up on My Baby.
Well, that was one that Addison brought in, but the origins of our love for that come from a hip hop sample. And then just kind of taking that back as it is kind of, I think, normal now with the internet and people finding out where the samples actually come from. This one coming from Houston's Ghetto Boys, Mind Playing Tricks on Me, and just kind of re-engineering it back. I mean, in the early days when we played this song, so many times someone would say, "Oh my God, you're playing the Ghetto Boys," and we'd be like, "No, we're playing Isaac Hayes," you know. And I think too it was a great choice for us because how the guitar works out. The guitar is so beautiful on that track, and Addison, just really kind of doubled down and really kind of got in there. And then, just kind of the beat changed up the beat a little bit to make it work. And I think it made perfect. That one has always made perfect sense from day one. Same as Gator Bait. Those are two that came right off the hip, super easy, not much rehearsal to get them sounding great. I think they sounded great. I would honestly say within the first month of us playing.
Well, especially Hung Up on My Baby, that's just such a great octave melody. It's like, as long as you're doing that, everyone's going to be happy.
Exactly.
And were those two songs that you had in your live repertoire?
Yeah. I mean, Addison brought both of those songs when we first started playing together. Even early on when the beginnings of Fat Produce were Addison with a looper. We didn't have a bass player. Our friend had a bar and he let us just show up and kind of jam on some things. And we jammed on those things because they were, you loop the bass line pretty easily. And I remember kind of after one of them, we just said, okay, it's time to get a bass player. But, it's those tunes, again, right from the rip sounded great.
Yeah, fantastic. Next on my list is 90% of Me Is You / Bam Bam.
Yeah, I mean, here's another, it's all tied into the hip hop and sampling culture as well. I mean, first of all, you have 90% of Me Is You, Gwen McCrae, legendary singer. And that's, I mean, probably my favorite of her songs. I mean, that just gives you a feeling when you're listening to it. And then, why do we transition into Bomb Bomb from that, you might be asking? Well, that all ties back into hip hop as well. And that's a Main Source. So Large Professor on that one, Just Hanging Out. So that tune combines those two tracks. I don't know if you're familiar with that recording, but yeah, Just Hanging Out is one of my favorite hip hop songs of all time. That combines samples from both of those songs. So, it's just, we're in 2025. We have this history behind us, not only of the original music, but also the people that have reworked that and sampling. And now we're beyond that, where we can see kind of all sides of it. I grew up very much, loving hip hop from a young age, but also loving funk and soul and jazz and where all that came from. So to just tie that together. And I mean, we played a great show 2 nights ago up in West Palm with all these DJs there, and they were so happy with us playing these songs because we were making it for them in a lot of ways, just tying the culture together. So
we love our
DJs, a great way.
Big time. We love the DJs, especially in our circle of people. We're lucky enough that we fanboy on them and they fanboy on us, and it's a really cool mutual relationship.
Well, I think that's a great way of putting it because you really are tying together pieces of culture and music together. And your listener may not be aware of it, but it may spark something they want to do additional research and find out what it is. Because, yeah, it's a great, I wouldn't use the term mashup, but it's a great combination of things and excellent arrangements and playing. Okay, next on my list is Stand Up.
Oh, that's one near and dear to my heart. So, Los Angeles, California is littered with great funk and soul bands. One being the Breakestra, which was formed by Miles Tackett. His father is Fred Tackett of Little Feat, and Miles is an LA legend, and he pretty much was the beginning of taking hip hop samples and bringing them back to their original place and letting people know. He put out this song Stand Up, with a singer, but on the B side, he did an instrumental. I've held this song near and dear in my heart for at least over a decade. And it was one that I brought to the band. Addison really liked it from the jump, and it made the most sense for us to put on this record. It is an LA classic, and it harkens back to where we're from, where our roots are from, the people that we associate with back home. And yeah, nothing says LA like stand up.
Wow, I did not know that about Miles Tackett. I'm a big Fred Tackett fan. I've seen him 100 times probably, and I have one of Miles's solos, but I had no idea. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he goes out sometimes, plays with his dad, but I mean, Miles is a true hardworking funk and soul man. He, started Funky Soul, which is a legendary DJ night in LA. Has the Breakestra, and obviously goes out and plays with his dad sometimes with Little Feat.
Wow, I did not know, so I'll have to check that out. I know we're running out of time, but I have a few more. Well, ask you about a few more songs. Um, 54/46 was my number.
Yeah, it's more references to the Caribbean, Toots and the Maytals on that one. And also, a lot of these tie into guitarists that I love. So we kind of were pulling from a version of that tune by Ernest Ranglin, who's definitely an unsung hero of jazz guitar. And I mean, everything else as well, but really incredible, virtuosic, stylish musician that I don't think enough people know about or take enough influence from. So he's got a really cool version of that. So that was why we chose that one.
Yeah, very good. So the album is available, as I mentioned now, digital download on Bandcamp. And you can find that, of course, at fatproduce.com. I'm sorry, fatproduce.bandcamp.com. It also includes two wonderful bonus tracks. And the, the vinyl sounds wonderful. The digital sounds wonderful as well. I didn't talk about all the songs. Is there anything else that you want to mention about the album that I didn't touch on?
I think for me, the only one that I want to mention that doesn't get enough credit is Zebra Walk. It was by the great organist Charlie Kennard. Has Idris on it, and it's not even. It's hard. It's a hard one to find. You can't find it much on digital platforms, even on streaming. It's left out, but it's probably to me one of Charles's funkiest songs, and I like how we reworked it. I didn't play the original Idris beat. We played it a little bit faster. And it's a very simple tune, but sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to cut. And so, I feel like we did a really good job. Addison did some cool things where he dropped out on the melody in the first A and then kind of brought it back in. And it's a banger. It's a short banger. It's the first thing to put on in the morning, get you out of bed and get you moving, I think.
Love
get
it.
your zebra walking.
Get your zebra walking into your 9 to 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Anything else, gentlemen?
I mean, talking about On Love,
Oh my God, yeah.
David T. Walker. I mean, a lot of this stuff is tied in with the sampling, so we don't even need to go into that. But really incredible sort of intro on that whole tune. I mean, that's like the epitome of chord melody playing. So when I heard that, I was like, all right, got to do a version of that. And that's one that we would like to get back into our live set, but it's definitely it's a bit of an involved arrangement. So I got to work that one up again. But yeah, just lush chords, beautiful chord melody arrangement, and yeah, that's a classic.
Sleeper of the record for me. That was the one that was
Wow.
the toughest song for us to record, but for me, it's my proudest moment of the record because it is so beautiful. It's definitely one of the most beautiful songs we've ever recorded to this day.
That's wonderful. I typically pick out my favorite songs from the album, and that was not one of them. And I love it, but it's not one of them because it's a wonderful album from start to finish. But I would definitely talk about that one too. It is a wonderful recording. Now you mentioned you've done some tracks for your next few projects. What about your live work? Where can we see you?
Yeah, this week we're headed out to the Bay Area of California to play some shows. So we'll be in San Francisco and San Rafael and Santa Cruz, and that's all later this week. And we're doing our best to get ourselves out of Miami. If you're in Miami, we're always playing in South Florida on a weekly basis in one project or another. But we're working on getting ourselves out of town. So in February, we're doing another Florida run. We're playing up at Dunedin Brewery in Tampa area, and we're playing at Baby J's in Gainesville. Um, I guess looking ahead, maybe some stuff over the summer, some jazz festivals. But every couple months, every few months, trying to get out of town and do some dates. So if you like fat produce, we will likely be in a region near you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, the album is wonderful. The first album was wonderful. The vinyl is, I love vinyl anyway, but the vinyl is excellent. It sounds great. The production is great. The tones are great. It's a great album. It's one of my favorite jazz albums of 2025. So thank you for that. Gentlemen, anything else you want to add?
Just make sure you follow us on our social media at Fat Produce, or go to fspotrecords.com to not only support us, but the other 10 great bands that are on that label, because we're really about supporting our funk and soul jazz and jazz community. So instead of going to our website, we suggest you go to our website via the website of the label, because you can find more great records to add to your collection.
Yeah, that's
Thank
what I
you.
would add. F Spot Records, the bands on there are really incredible. You would not go wrong buying any of those other records. Night Owls, Bombillas, A Dubta,
White Blinds.
Mestizo Beat. I mean, all killer bands. So if you like what we're doing and you want some adjacent funky stuff, that is a must. All those records are a must have.
And thank you for that recommendation. Certainly, a listener should do that. Wonderful work. Addison Rifkind and Michael Duffy, thank you for your time. The Fat Produce album, Soulful Days, is out now. Go out and get it, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.